Watch The Atheist Experience live Sundays at 4:30 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTAXP and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callaxp.
It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello and welcome everybody to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that is loose with morals and flexible with boundaries. I'm the ACA's patron saint of apostasy and debauchery, Arden Hart, filling in the spot of whatever the shoes of Christy Powell tonight. And my co-host here knows a thing or two about pushing boundaries himself. Huck? Oh, you're muted.
See, I'm the only one who got the memo to wear green today. That's okay. That works.
And joining us today for the first time on Secular Sexuality is therapist and poly advocate Justine Guzman. Welcome, Justine.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Awesome.
All right. Well, tonight we're bound for healthy boundaries. So give us a call with your stories and questions at 512-991-9242 or tiny.cc/callsex because the show is coming right now. No clip? I thought there would be a clip there. Okay. Well, there.
All right. So here is our segment where we talk about what is turning us on this week. And that is just anything and everything that you can be excited about. Podcast, movie, person, fun activity you might be into. So yeah, why don't we start with Justine? I would love to hear what is turning you on this week.
Okay, so every Monday morning, I do a kind of podcast with another consensually non-monogamous individual friend of mine, and it's kind of like a book club. So we just wrapped up reading "Love Is Not Colorblind" by Kevin Patterson, which is about the intersection of race, ethnicity, and polyamory, like those communities. So it was really interesting. I had never read that book before. It covered a lot of really interesting things to navigate when you're a person of color within the polyamorous community. And yeah, neither of us had read it. So it was interesting kind of discovering it chapter through chapter, because usually what we cover in that book club is stuff that like we've read before, like Ethical Slut, like seminal classics, but this was new. So it was good.
Oh, awesome. That sounds so interesting. I kind of might have to pick that up myself.
Yeah,
So
this is why I
thanks for the
love doing secular
recommendation.
sexuality. We do prep work going into it and research going into it, but I always end up with more to read after a show than I did before. That's
Very
good.
true. And Puck, how about you? What's turning you on this week?
Anal dilators. More specifically, like, more broadly, the idea that good sex takes preparation. Putting a scene together, being in the right mood, and part of that also includes getting your body ready. Being in the right conditioning, being well fed. If it's a scene that's coming up, just taking a moment to make sure that you're prepared for it. And sometimes the more prep that goes into a scene, the more, paradoxically, the more spontaneous you can be in a scene because you had the good preparation for it.
Totally. Awesome. Well, for me, I know that the socio-political climate as of late in our country and across the globe has been a little bit stressful. I don't know if you know, been a little stressed. I'm gonna shout out not my show Transatlantic, but the community at that show. I took a few weeks off because I was getting a little overwhelmed with all of the stuff, and I gotta say they're such amazing people, and I love my queer community. Amazing, resilient, beautiful souls, and souls, and I'm so excited to be a part of that. I'm really grateful for all of those people and everyone here for being so supportive while I kind of got my feet back in the game, So, but with that said, about getting your feet in the game, Justine. So we're gonna talk tonight about like boundaries and polyamory, and with the polyamorous kind of like movement, so to speak. growing and gaining popularity, one of the effects it seems to have had on like mainstream culture is people starting to get the idea that relationships are actually something you can negotiate, and they're like contracts that you can form with other people, not maybe just a package deal that you either buy into or you don't. So, like, what do people, you know, not even necessarily in romantic or sexual relationships, but just broadly, like, what do people in relationships owe each other?
Mm. It's a good question. I feel like the simple answer is probably honesty and communication about what you need. I mean, obviously, there's more things to add on to that, but I feel like foundationally, like honesty with those people, with yourself about what you want.
Mm. Yeah, no, that
Yeah.
that makes total sense. I think that's definitely where I would want to, excuse me, where I'd want to start at the very least.
Hmm.
Um, and
And I think
kind of,
like for me personally, like one of the biggest things that I want whenever a friendship is developing or a partnership is developing is I want them to be as aware of my boundaries as clearly as possible. Like as soon as it looks like we're starting to look like something might develop, right? Because some boundaries are going to be deal breakers for some people, and I feel like I owe it to them to at least be honest about where I am and what the possibilities are and what possibilities aren't, so they can make a more informed decision about what they want their involvement to be.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, like as we kind of start getting into it, I feel like another thing that we owe the people that we're engaged with is respect for those boundaries, their bodily autonomy, respect for everything. It's probably another thing that I would probably add.
yeah, I think, yeah, that makes perfect sense. People definitely want to feel respected and seen when they're, committing to like a long-term relationship of any shape or color with somebody. Uh,
Mhm.
and kind of with that in mind, as we talk about like the growth of polyamory and society changing, like do you see those changes in society already? Like as people are, kind of realizing that I don't have to hold on to this like sort of religious mindset of what a relationship is, that it's this like forever bond between two people and two people alone. Do you think that's already having an impact?
Um, yes and no. So I'm in Texas. That's where I currently am. And I feel like it's really hard for people inside the community, outside of the community, to kind of let go of that measure of like success is staying together and not breaking up. That is like what relational success is.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's really hard for people to let go of that. And I feel like that comes from like, toxic, religious, monogamous kind of scripting. Um, yeah, I feel like that's really hard to let go in general. Um, Even polyamorous people, when things end, when relationships end, like maybe this means that I'm not cut out for polyamory. Maybe this means that polyamory is not viable. That like narrative continues to kind of even interject in their minds then too. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think you see that a lot, right? That when people kind of feel like they've like failed, maybe they default to like, oh, were these like values that were instilled in me so early from this kind of like archaic like origin, are those like maybe real? Maybe I failed because I didn't live up to those standards or something like that.
Yeah, and that's
Um,
definitely the feeling that I got growing up in my environment, that, it's like I had an idea in my head of what I wanted relationships to be. It does not match the idea that the people who raised me would want my relationship to be. And there was that little struggle there as to, what, it's my life, it's my relationships, I want to conduct them as I see fit, even if it doesn't fit any particular mold or any particular established structure. And I think there might even be some tension where, people are taught this is the model and they don't feel like that model fits for them.
yeah, I think probably lots of people, even people watching right now, feel that way and maybe are just kind of coming around to the idea that maybe there are other ways to negotiate contracts and relationships for them that could be like different than what they're used to. And with that in mind, like, what kinds of things should we be negotiating in these contracts? Like, what is central to our autonomy that we should fight for, and what's maybe like fair game for negotiating?
Man, I mean, I feel like that answer is going to be different for everybody. I immediately wanted to say like everything is fair game. I don't know why that was my impulse. That was my initial impulse. Like everything should be fair game. And I think this is like where I kind of say, if different relational orientations is something that you're kind of trying to get into, you have to know yourself very well. Who you are, what you want, where you are willing to budge and where you're not, um, so that you can kind of know that information from the jump when you do kind of enter into these relational negotiations with individuals. Um, so, yeah, man, that's hard.
No, I think it's a beautiful question because when we talk about boundaries, typically we're talking about romantic relationships or sexual relationships. But how many times have we gotten calls, Arden, on other shows where people want to set the boundary of, I don't want to have this type of conversation with you, right? So it's this is why I love doing these shows, because the things that some people do that are just second nature in unorthodox relationships, they actually have interesting mirrors in, we'll just call them, the more mainstream relationships, that they can learn from the people who have been engaging in this long time. Like boundaries are for friends too, or they're for family, and by learning how to establish your boundaries in a relationship, you can start to apply those ideas to how to set up healthy boundaries just with your friends or coworkers, or people who aren't necessarily involved with you in a relationship way.
Yeah, that's funny because like I do feel like, me developing my own boundaries within my relationships has helped me develop boundaries with my family, which I feel like is in general a place where boundaries don't get adhered to all that much. Like I hear a lot of like, well, they're family, they're blood, like they're always going to be around, as that like kind of writing off as like whatever they're going to do to you, whatever, their blood, they got to stick around. And it's like, no, like I've learned that, I can kind of determine what my relationships look like relationally, like romantically and sexually. The same thing should hold true for family. Like you should be able to also navigate, talk about, negotiate those boundaries with family too. They shouldn't just have like carte blanche to do whatever it is that they want to do to you. So, yeah.
No, and coming from the culture that I did, where certain boundaries just don't exist, and where people feel that getting to kibitz in your relationship is just part of a parental or grandparental or other family member right? Like one very popular one is, when am I going to get grandkids, right? Now,
Yeah.
my the traditional answer to that is, if you want grandkids, you can have your own. But really, like, there's this idea, and it makes me wonder if they grew up in that and felt just fine in that framework, where they said, they were taught, this is how you're supposed to have a relationship, this is how you're supposed to have a marriage and a family. They're fine with it's a model that fits them, which, fine, it works for a lot of people, that's great. But then when you find that one really weird person like me who it doesn't fit for, then it even makes it stronger, look like there's something wrong with that one person who can't seem to make it work. And then it's seen as my problem that I can't make it work, rather than the problem of having toxic expectations being put on you that really don't have much of a basis, like a really good foundation. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Don't, I feel like I could talk about culture and polyamory like for a long time. So like
Oh,
don't
please
get me
do.
started on that.
yeah, it makes me curious, because, like, I'm Pacific Islander, and my family grew, like, I always tell people, if you want to have a good idea of what my upbringing was like, watch the Joy Luck Club, because there's a lot there that I absolutely definitely related to. So I'd be super curious as to how different cultural expectations meet or intersect with poly families and relationships.
Yeah, yeah. I'm Hispanic, so I do get a lot of the like, when are you going to give me grandbabies rhetoric, and especially here recently, because I came out to my parents as polyamorous maybe a few years ago, um, And it's a lot of fear that I'm going to end up alone. I'm not going to be able to find someone that, aligns with me in that orientation, that it's not going to stick, that I'm going to end up alone. And that's very like terrifying to my mom. She does not like that. So, I mean, in some ways, it kind of being polyamorous kind of goes against the grain of the collectivist part of my culture. And so much as like I have to just be me and not be afraid that I'm going to end up alone. I can't really be anything that settles me down into like a marriage where I'm compromising on things.
And then doesn't that hurt because it feels like, like you have a partner that supports you, but you get the feeling that your family will never really support them because they're like, it's like how can this person want to be with a person like you who wants to be in a poly relationship? So you don't feel like you get that your partner gets the support from your family that they ought to have.
Yeah, I mean, and it's too like on the other side of that, when things don't work out, it's always pinned on, well, like it was never going to work out. Like polyamory doesn't work. And that's usually, to blame, or in my family's eyes, that is what's to blame for why relationships end, when it's actually rarely the case.
See, I told you before the show that like we have what we want to talk about, and then here we are, like we're 15 minutes in, we're already way out in the weeds. But just out of curiosity, we talk about structures where polyamory and is definitely strongly against. Are there any cultures where because of the cultural awareness, it kind of greases the wheels for poly relationships? It's like easier for these cultures to accept someone who is poly. Have you ever run into anything like that?
Um,
I'm just curious. I genuinely don't know.
Honestly, no.
Monogamy is the
I'm
thing,
sure
huh?
they're out there. I'm sure it's a thing, but like, yeah, it's not something that I've come across like, naturally.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're obviously on like the ACA and we talk a lot about religion and stuff like that. I'm willing to bet that there is a significant impact of like sort of like a colonizer Christian religion having such a significant impact on the global culture, that if those cultures did exist, we probably are not privy to that information, as we might be in a different timeline. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, kind of back on the sorry to rain it. This is a very interesting conversation. I think we can definitely keep talking more about this, but kind of thinking back to like y'all are talking about family requesting things from you, and that maybe are crossing your boundaries and things like that. And I'm kind of curious, like within any of those relationships or with a partner, like do we have the right to limit like those kind of conversations about like those things, or maybe about like who we spend our time with, or who we can share our bodies with, or how or what we masturbate to and things like that?
Mm. I feel like the short answer is no. We don't have the right to limit what other partners want to do, or even what partners want of like what they think we should be doing. Um, but along that, though, I do feel that it's important for conversation when it comes to, I know rules and boundaries is something that we're talking about right now. Conversation about rules and boundaries and just like how we conduct ourselves. I do feel like that should be collaborative. Everyone should have a say. Everyone should be able to voice their opinion, and you hope that there's enough respect and enough autonomy for those things to be heard and honored. Um,
Yeah.
where I feel like that gets difficult if someone just like comes out and is like, "You're not allowed to do that." Like, well, no, that's not how that should work. But if someone comes to me, just sharing how they feel about something or what is coming up for them when I engage in this behavior or whatever, I'm more likely to engage collaboratively with that. That's how I feel like it should go on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that makes perfect sense. I can definitely relate from my own personal experience. I've had relationships where it's been either way, and so much so I feel like the predominant cultural narrative is that you fit into the box, like because that's just how it is. that when I've had partners like my current partner who are willing to like have conversations and negotiate, it's honestly kind of jarring. Like, oh wow, this is a conversation we're allowed to engage in. That's like it's almost uncomfortable in some
Mm.
ways. And I think that's kind of why this conversation tonight is so interesting about, you know, about the fact that I think probably a lot of people experience that discomfort when they're finding themselves able to negotiate at all. Yeah, and so I kind of want to now get into, we talked about like, you know, you don't necessarily have the right to limit someone, but there should be like a collaborative effort. Like, how do we know what reasonable boundaries look like? And like, to what extent is that just like us trying to control things or take away our partner's autonomy? And like, how do we like separate those things?
I think that that self awareness has to kind of come back into play there. If you can kind of sit down with yourself when you have certain reactions or emotions or thoughts to in response to like what a partner is doing or whatever, if you can kind of sit down with yourself and ask like, okay, what's going on for me here? What is it that I'm having a reaction to? What is it that I feel like is being threatened? What is it that I need? Can I communicate those things? um if you can kind of connect down into like the empathic root of whatever, I feel like that helps figure out, is this reasonable? Is this a reasonable ask? Is this a reasonable response or thought? Um, so I feel like that's a good place to start. I feel like that's another place where it's really difficult and a really vulnerable place for people to be.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, why I recommend everybody be in therapy. A therapist can kind of help with, you know, that insight, and lead you through that kind of vulnerable insight. But I guess that's where I would start.
Okay, so I wanted to go back to, and it might be a purely semantic thing. It's something that you said a little while ago about one thing in relationships and therapy that I picked up was the difference between you statements and I statements, right? Like you can say, I feel invalidated by, you know, when this happens, as opposed to saying you're not allowed to do something that so I was hoping that we could talk a little bit about what the difference is between setting a boundary and creating a rule, or even if there is one, and maybe the only difference between a boundary and a rule is the way it's phrased. It's phrased as a like, I will not have a partner who is sexually active with other people, versus you're not allowed to have sex with anybody else or I'll leave you. So what are the fuzzy differences here between a boundary and a rule?
Mm. Um, that's like that's like a hot take in the polyamorous community, like rules and boundaries. It always like whips everybody up into a frenzy. Um,
That's
and
why we're
and part of
talking about it now. That's why.
On the edge of my
right.
seat. Yeah.
Part of me thinks that like it's semantics. Like these feel like synonyms. They feel like the same thing. And then another part of me is like, well, no, like words matter. And how I feel comfortable defining it, how I've seen it defined, especially within the polyamorous community, is exactly what you're kind of already touching on. A rule is like, you can't do that. Like it's trying to put a prohibition on what people other than you should be doing or what should not be doing. And I feel like a boundary is more like, this is how I'm going to conduct myself. This is what I'm going to do. It's my behavior is the only behavior that I can control. And that's more of a boundary. Um, but I mean, once again, with that, I feel like all of that should be collaborative too. Like I have, I feel like they feel like hard and fast rules that I collaboratively arrived at with my partners. We all kind of came to a mutual understanding and agreement. This is how we're going to conduct ourselves. Is that a rule? I guess technically, because it's involving behavior of people that aren't me. But it's something that like we collaboratively came together on.
So talking about collaboration then, because there are some people who are fantastic about it, knowing what their boundaries are and expressing it to their partners. There are some partners who aren't as good at letting their partners know what they are. So it's not that the boundaries don't exist. They're there, but maybe they just don't know how to adequately communicate it. So how do we start to learn from our partners? Okay, what are your boundaries? What are your expectations? What are your limits? How do you start to have that conversation?
Very gently. You know, not in the middle of an argument. Something very like chill. And even, and this is funny too, because I feel like a little bit of my kink brain kind of kicks into this. And like, these are the conversations that you have before you, I think you had already touched on it, that you have before you enter into a scene. You try to negotiate as much as you can. You try to know the terrain as much as you can before you're actually doing something. I feel like some of this, you can sit down and you can talk to someone about like, okay, well, this is how I want to be in this relationship. And you can do all the prep work. And then you get into the relationship and you kind of stumble across boundaries you didn't know were there for you, or, you know, whatever. And then you kind of have to come up with things on the fly a little bit more. I think entering into those conversations respectfully, jointly, knowing that, you know, y'all are on the same side of the table, you're not in competition or in a fight with each other. Remembering that this is a person that you actually like and they're not your enemy. So try to cue into some empathy when, even if they're saying something that pisses you off or whatever, remembering that I think is important. Yeah.
No, I love what you said about talking about it before the scene, because there's admittedly small subset of the population who thinks that asking for permission, asking for consent kind of ruins the mood. But remember, we just talked about preparation in the what's turning you on. And the more you have the more you're working on making sure you're on the same page with each other before a scene or before engaging in a relationship, the less you have to ask in the middle of the scene. Like if you already know that something is going to be allowed or encouraged in a scene, if you've already talked about that ahead of time, you don't have to like get the assurance against like, hey, we're still good for no, because you already know, you've already talked about it. You can immerse yourself in the scene more because you've had these conversations ahead of time. That's just me.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, it's the same stuff with polyamory. Like there is so much conversation and communication and continuous communication that happens before someone enters into a relationship, I feel, when they're in it, just because like you just have to do that. Like I can't tell you how many times I've been in a conversation with someone like we're on a dating app and I'm very clear about me being polyamorous and that I have other partners, and we talk about it initially and they seem to be okay with it. And then, you know, some time passes and then I'm having this conversation again. Like there's so much prep conversation that needs to happen. It's interesting.
Yeah,
And just to answer Kay Lay's question in chat just really quick, no, it does not necessarily have to be. A polyamorous relationship does not necessarily have to be sexual, just like any other romantic relationship does not necessarily have to be sexual. So,
yeah. Well,
sorry about
I
that.
would love for us to keep getting into the how. We did a little bit of like the what and all of that good stuff, but I see that we do have a caller on the line. So Puck, I don't know if you're all queued up with Colin's studio.
Yeah, I am. Let's talk to Randy. Pronouns are he, him, from New York. How are you doing, Randy?
Fine. How are you all?
Oh, doing great. Looks like you had a question about animosity between the polyamory community and the lifestyle community.
Yes. So I've been participating in both separately and at the same time, and also been in like monogamous relationships. And one thing I found is that there's this perception between the polyamorous community and the lifestyle community of trying to find the right words. So the lifestyle community in general, and this is Randy's experience. This is not like, I don't, like, someone else might correct me in the comments, but my experience is that, you know, the lifestyle community is like, oh, those polyamorous, they're such prudes, and they're just like, oh, they're all like kumbaya. And the polyamorous community, that the lifestyle people are such sluts, and they just fuck everything that they find in sight. And it's like, wow, like this is, I would like or expect that these two communities would support each other, even though their environment can be different, but can also have like similarities. And it's just like, wow, like these are communities that are based on communication and consent. And and this is one example, my experience. How can this be like? And I'm talking about my recent experiences as well. Like this is not like you guys were talking about boundaries, and I just think like, well, I guess we should respect everyone's choices as long as everyone is like communicating and like having enthusiastic consent about the relationships, their sexual engagements, etc. So I just would like to have your takes if you have experienced the same thing, or if you disagree with me as far as experiences, or what are your thoughts about this?
First of all, that sucks. That was your experience. You hate that. I haven't had that exact experience because I am a part of both of those communities. What I have experienced is by like negative bias or like I don't even know, prejudice between the polyamorous community and the queer community. And you would think being in either of those communities, there would be more acceptance, and not always the case. A lot of hate that I've experienced being a pansexual woman has come from within the community of people that are also queer. So I've experienced that. I've experienced I'm having a good time with someone. This happened. I was at one of my favorite bars in Dallas. A woman was talking to me. We were having a good time, whatever. She figures out that I'm polyamorous, that I have male partners, and the like charm turned off, and she got really nasty with me. And like, I don't understand how you can do that. Put her hand in my face. It was very, very disrespectful. I've gotten that. Like there's been some of that between, the queer community that I'm a part of and polyamorous communities. Ignorance, not wanting to understand. So I mean, I've experienced those between those two realms. Sorry, that was your experience though.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes without saying, although I agree with you, Randy, you definitely it seems like when you're a part of one of those communities that may be like marginalized, you would think that people would approach all those conversations with like empathy and understanding of what it was like to be marginalized. But I definitely, as with many years of being in the community, the queer community, and being an activist, and not really plugged into the poly community, though I do consider myself poly, there's prejudice everywhere, right? There's, no matter what community you look in, there's going to be bad actors, there's going to be hateful people, there's going to be people who are judgmental. And I think, unfortunately, that is maybe less of a poly versus lifestyle situation and more of just the human condition kind of situation. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. There's assholes everywhere.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. You're probably right, but I was really shocked about this because, and so then I find myself, because I've been, as you Justine, I've been in both communities, and I was like, this is like, what are we doing here? This is just not what we should be. We should be supporting each other in our choices and our establishment of boundaries, because, and I don't know, Justine might correct me if I'm wrong, but in general, both communities tend to be very good at communication, at talking about boundaries, establishing, as I said, enthusiastic consent, and you're both in both things. Both the sexual part and the relationship part can be really good. So I just was a little bit surprised when I got into this. But maybe I've just gotten unlucky and gotten to like a group of people that just have these prejudice against each other, because I just
no, and I think part of it is like I think part of it is that they are answering a question about boundaries involving other people, but in very different ways and in ways that they can rationalize. And there's this tendency of feeling like my answer is the right answer, right? Like there's a kind of mirroring this, there's a tension between digital sex workers and in-person sex workers, where digital sex workers look at the in-person sex workers are like, how can you do anything that's that unsafe? And and it's like you're seeing them in person and they could just hurt you. And then the in-person sex workers will look at the digital ones and say, how can you just put your stuff on the internet like that? Anybody can see it. You have no control over what. So there are things that they don't understand about each other. They've answered it for themselves, but they don't have that sense of empathy
Yeah.
of trying to understand how another person has come up to a reasonable, rational answer for them. And yeah, I hate to admit that they can get a little dogmatic about those beliefs instead of trying to be more empathetic and understanding.
Definitely. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
sure
that
you
sounds
all
right.
here have. When have we gone a year, going through Pride Month where people haven't objected to kink at Pride? You know, people considering like people
Yeah.
just wearing some like kink gear as like participating in like a scene on a float, which is clearly not what's happening. It's every year this stuff happens. So I do think, not to repeat myself, I guess. Well, I am going to repeat myself. But I do think this is just a human problem, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm definitely sorry that that's been your experience, and I hope that you're able to like kind of build your own community and like chosen family of people who maybe are a little bit more understanding and empathic towards like what you are going through and towards other people in the community broadly.
And there also might be like I
Yeah,
leave some room for the idea that there might be some like protectiveness and defensiveness saying, you know what, we're already like not understood. So you clearly don't understand us, so you're not one of us. And you kind of get sick of having to be an apologist for your chosen lifestyle after a while. And it's not a great place to be, but I can understand why somebody would just shut that down. And I also wanted to clarify too, when you're talking about the difference between polyamory and lifestyle, that in polyamory you mean like having meaningful relationships with more than one person, but lifestyle is more like, well, I guess you guys are my chosen dance partners for the evening, right, where you go to lifestyle clubs just to meet people for that. Is that kind of representing what you're talking about?
yeah, yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
However, even in the lifestyle, like even in the lifestyle, there's like you do develop friendships. Like even though it's the I guess the essence about sex and kinks and thumbs and you communicate about, but it's not like that it just get down to business. It's like there are relationships and also in the polyamorous, like you could have a romantic or not asexual relationship, and you could have very intense and gratifying sexual relationships. It's just is like the way I see it is like a spectrum, and it should be nuanced. It should be like just black and white. It's just driving me nuts. And like you, Justine, I I grew up in Colombia, and my family, half of my family's Colombian, and it's the same thing. Like I feel like I have to like fight against their views about this, and then people that are supposed to be in my community, their views about other. It's really like wow, it's just too many fronts. Sorry.
No, 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 no. It's a wonderful lesson. And like if somebody answers a question differently than you do, be the example, be the one who says, you know what, it's not for me, but I want to understand where you're coming from and how you've answered yes to some of the questions I've said no to.
Yeah, yeah,
And deciding that something isn't for you is absolutely okay. Like we all identify as some degree of poly here, on the panel, but at the same time we understand that the poly model doesn't fit for everybody, and the same poly model that might work in my relationships wouldn't work in Arden's, and that's fine. So we're not sitting here saying everybody should be poly. The big message here, hopefully, is that even in poly relationships we have things that people in monogamous relationships can learn from. But yeah, I do apologize for that you have run into such dogmatic people who are very set in
yeah.
their answers and don't want to understand. So the best thing to do is not be that person and be more in the line of, how does that, Arden, your kink is not my kink, but your kink is okay. Okay, something like
Yep.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Also, there's like, and people evolve. Like, people can be in the lifestyle. People can be like, and you're allowed to do that. Like, and you can decide. Like, I'm in polyamorous, but I decided I want to be in a monogamous relationship, and that's okay too. Like, that's fine. Like, this, like, you should be allowed to change your mind, change your like. It's not. It doesn't have to be fixed.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's the core of the conversation we're having here tonight, right? Is about setting those boundaries and communicating what you're feeling and what your needs are and what kind of relationship you want to have. I think everyone wants to feel like wanted and loved and supported in some extent. And negotiating how we do that is really the core of the theme tonight. So
Yeah,
yeah.
the one asterisk I would add to that is absolutely people change, and your understanding of yourself and the boundaries that you would want to set would change, but it is very much to the benefit of the relationships you're in to make sure you communicate that adequately to the people you're in a relationship with. It's very unfair to have a new boundary and then get upset at people for not just picking up on the fact that you've set a new one. So talk to everybody, talk to each other.
Yeah, exactly. Well, guys, so I don't know if you have more calls, but this was an interesting conversation. So, and great show. So, hope to talk to you soon.
Right?
Yeah,
We
thank you so
appreciate it.
much,
Thank you very
Randy.
much.
Okay,
Awesome.
take care.
Well, I'd like to remind everyone that this is the call-in show, and we do have some open lines. So we've got the number right below here. It's 512-991-9242. So please do give us a call. We're about to jump into a little bit more of the hows of negotiating these kinds of new relationships. But before we do that, we're going to take a look back on the past week of shows.
I just caught a flash of my own obituary in my head. You know, local atheist extremist YouTuber dies in, latex accident. Full body latex accident.
My oldest son has incredible hand-eye coordination from playing video games. I'm not going to ask him whether he's watching porn with brain stimulation, but...
Does that take a lot of coordination? I've been doing it wrong.
No, it's not anything to do with that, Pastor Greg Locke. It's that people get annoyed when someone starts accusing women of witchcraft in the 21st century. You know, that's the explanation I'm going with, not that the devil's getting pissed off because you finally revealed his secrets.
And all the scary stories about, when Jesus comes back and everybody, now they walk out of their grave all dressed in as a family. In
Right.
the book.
Yeah, it'll be like the Thriller video.
You don't really believe that the cracker actually changes to human Jesus flesh, though, right? Like, you don't think you're chewing on a cracker and then all of a sudden it becomes Jesus man meat in your mouth.
That's a bad cracker, dude. That's what that is.
This is why you watch Secular Sexuality, because we are the show that puts that promo roll on first. Okay, you'll know the funniest moments from last week's show before the audience of all the other shows. And
Everyone's here to just listen to Shannon say silly things like the word vagina 20 times or about Jesus man meat in your mouth.
You know what? We were doing so good. We were doing so good, Arden, about finally like putting that running gag behind us of vagina on every on every promo. But now, thank you for bringing it back with a vengeance.
It's back. It's back with, you're right, with a vengeance. Yeah, Shannon will never live that down. But to get back into the conversation, so we kind of touched on this before. We were talking about like how do we start that conversation? I think you said gently, but should we have like maybe some like basic examples or some like simple ones you can think of about like what are some reasonable boundaries we can ask of like our partners and friends and other relationships to help us feel maybe more secure or seen or heard?
So are we talking about them in a framework of like you're newly starting to navigate polyamory, or just in general relationally, or what are we talking about here?
I mean, I think probably both. If we can do both, can we do both?
Let's do both. Both is good.
Sure.
Both is good.
I mean, yeah, once again, I feel like that's pretty subjective, but well, I guess I can look on my personal boundaries. Safer sex practices, kind of getting on the same page with that, I feel like is a good beginning conversation to have, whether you're in a polyamorous relationship or monogamous or you're a swinger or whatever. I feel like that's like a good conversation to start in on when it comes to navigating these things.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I definitely see with like safer sex too. I hear before multiple times people have been like almost taken aback or offended by the idea that I might want like some blood work or like an STI panel done before engaging with each other. And I think it's scary to know that if I didn't bring that up, that maybe that would have been something that was just swept under the carpet and not even addressed. Yeah. So, so kind of building off of that, are there like, um, what things are good, like maybe, safer sex practices to put boundaries around? Like, is it okay to ask your partner not to have, like maybe interact with sex workers or going to strip clubs, or if it is okay to ask them not to do that, is there like a right and wrong way to go about that?
Um, just because of me and who I am as a person, super soft therapist. I definitely wouldn't want to say it's not okay or it's okay. I think they're curious things to talk about. Like, if my partner came to me and they were like, I don't want you going to strip clubs, I would want to know like what's going on behind there. Like, if you can kind of let me into your world and I can understand, maybe I'll agree. But off the top of it, like someone being like, no, don't go to strip clubs. I'm like, well, that's not an okay thing to ask. I think it just all has to do with like whether it makes it okay or not okay is like, where are you coming from when you're asking me these things? I think it all goes back to that.
Yeah, and I think also like it's important to like when you have that first conversation, which is going to be awkward and uncomfortable, and you're not going to get everything on the table. It's because there's so many things that could possibly happen. There's no way you can pre-talk about everything. Is that the conversation has to continue, right? It's like, well, okay, it's like we set this boundary, then you went out this weekend. You were, we respected the boundaries, but let's talk about it. Let's talk about how it felt for you, how it felt for me. Do we change the boundary? Do we agree that this boundary was too restrictive and that we should be a little bit, or the exact opposite? Okay, this happened and it turned out I'm not as okay with this as I thought I was. Can we talk about this? But I think you made it a good point that, when you say, you don't go to strip clubs, usually there's something, like for me personally, there's something there behind. It's not the strip club and it's not the going to the strip clubs. It's something behind that, like maybe a bad experience or something you associate with going to strip clubs that you don't like maybe it's because a ridiculous amount of money has the potential of being spent there, right? So let's talk about that. It's not seeing another naked body, it's that you're dumping a lot of cash into it. Then when you keep on talking about it and try to find the deeper issues, maybe that's something that does turn into a more healthy boundary to set.
hmm I love that you kind of touched on that, like, just because something gets agreed upon, it doesn't mean like the conversation stops there. It should be continuous and ever evolving. And I think a lot of people get scared, like, okay, well, this is what we decided. It is never going to change. We're going to carve that in stone. Like, it's like, no, no, no. Like, what maybe worked for you a couple of years ago or worked for y'all doesn't work anymore. That conversation needs to continue to happen and there to be flexibility and, um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that totally makes sense. So kind of in that vein, like, are there any like practices that you engage in, or maybe like standard practices you might recommend for like other like polyamorous couples, or not couples, I guess, obviously, groups, partners, um, that they could that can help them to like keep that conversation going and renegotiating contracts further if like those feelings do change.
Oh yeah, man. I get real nerdy. Like, I'm a therapist by trade, but like this is just like how I am in general. With my partners, we do a relationship check-in every week.
Love that.
So, and that looks the check-in looks different based off of that partner and I, but like what it looks like with my anchor partner is, we talk about readiness to date other people. We talk about what's going good in our relationship this week, what's going bad, appreciations that we have for each other, stuff like that. I do that. I do that every week with each of my partners because I'm a nerd.
I love the intentionality of that. I think maybe a lot of us probably engage in that sort of thing kind of offhandedly or passively, but I think that's probably how it ends up getting forgotten about or done less frequently. I think the intentionality of that like weekly revisit and check in, and that sounds so awesome. um, so are there any like kind of like red flags that maybe you notice that like when you're negotiating that maybe something you're asking for is not okay, or maybe is like breaching those boundaries, or yeah.
Something like red flags of things that I'm kind of wanting to negotiate that are maybe bordering on like, this is a big ask, this is inappropriate.
Yeah, or that, yeah.
I can say for me, because I'm a deeply emotional person, as we all are, because we're all human beings. I find that if I have a strong emotional reaction to something that a partner has done or whatever, and I immediately choose that moment to be like, oh, we're having a conversation about this now, and I want to talk about boundaries, I want to talk about how we're going to conduct ourselves, that's usually not the best point to enter into that conversation. I'm too whipped up. I haven't had a chance to kind of like piece out what is happening for me. So usually if the conversation point and my strong reaction, if those two things happen too close together, I'm usually not going to get anywhere super productive. So I guess that's a personal red flag for me, that I might ask for something that is inappropriate, that is not something that I should be asking for.
That's really interesting, because I think maybe I was kind of anticipating more of like, um, I don't know. I guess like maybe I'm realizing some of my own like internal things that I hold, like live in action of like trying to like read something from them, but learning to like, I think that's really interesting of like noticing your own emotional state and learning to take the step back and maybe attempt it again in a way that's a little bit more effective.
No, that makes
Um,
sense to me. Like I looked at that question, I was thinking about you'd say, okay, these are certain things that you're not allowed to ask for a boundary on or not allowed to ask for. And then you come in here with no, it's more about your mental state and the reasons that you're asking for it in the first place. I think that's awesome. And it makes sense because like when you're angry, that's not the best time to make a decision or to try to have a conversation. So yeah, it makes sense. Like this happened. And you can't help how you feel about it. If something made you jealous, if something made you upset, if something hurt you, that's a natural, valid feeling. But that doesn't mean that that time to talk about it is while you are still processing that emotion. It's like process it within yourself and then have that conversation. Like that's happened to me a couple of times. Where something happened, I was caught off guard by how it would affect me, and then we'd have to talk about it and figure it out and figure out what. And again, the instant thought might be, okay, you are no longer allowed to do this with another person because of this, how I felt inside. But that's just the initial reaction. Then when you have the time to think about it and talk about it, then you realize, oh, it's not so much the specific action perhaps, but more that, just pulling it off the top of my head, this is something that you seem to willingly engage in with somebody else, but not with me. And that kind of made me feel a little awkward. Can we talk about this and try to figure out what's going on? I don't know what the specifics might be, but yeah, don't talk about it while you're angry. Don't talk about it while you're sad. Don't talk about it while you're horny. Settle down and get into a rational frame of mind. And then, but put that pin there. Say, it's like, we're going to, I want to talk to you about this at some point. It's good.
And it's not like that's like a nice thing for me to be able to like sit here and say that, like, oh, that's what you should do. And it is something that I legitimately try to do, in my life. But like when it's happening and I'm like, we're having that strong emotional reaction, like it's not super easy to just like, oh, well, let me wait for a second, let me like engage intentionally with it. Like sometimes that happens and sometimes that doesn't. And all you can kind of I guess this is like, foundational boundary, I guess, if we want to talk about it, is you're allowed to have your emotions, but you're not allowed to let it disrespectfully, inappropriately inform your action or your behavior towards someone else. Like you're not allowed to lash out irrationally. That's where, you do need to take a pause and reflect and make sure that, you're not letting the heat of the moment inform how you treat someone.
yeah, I do see we have a couple more callers we're going to get to in just a second, but I think that is a really maybe like almost the most, at least for me, I don't know about the viewers or anything, the most helpful thing is I think sometimes we encounter a lot of this advice of these like, kind of like ways of navigating relationships, and like, oh, when you encounter the situation, just do X, and kind of being able to remind yourself and forgive yourself when you're like, we are, you know, we're humans, we're animals, like we're not going to always handle things as effectively as we possibly could. I think that kind of mindset of reminding ourselves goes a long way, and maybe even helps to foster the good behaviors a little more effectively.
Yeah, I mean, grace for self is so important, especially, I mean, that's important in all kinds of relationship dynamics, but especially when you're going forward in something that is kind of new terrain, like polyamory or kink or whatever. I don't know how to do this. This is the first time that I'm doing this in this life. I got to have some grace for how I'm navigating that.
Definitely. Well, before we get going, we have a couple more questions on the line before we wrap up tonight. But I know we've got 2 callers on the line, right, Puck? Who we taking?
We do. Let's go with Max. Max, pronouns are he, him, from Oregon. He wants to talk about the stigma around being attracted to trans people. Tell us a little bit more about what you mean.
Yeah, hi. So my name's Max. I'm from Portland, like you said. I describe myself, first of all, I love the show, I have to say. This is like way better than like Loveline used to be on the radio. Like, love you guys. Love everybody here. But yeah, so my experience, for what it's worth, is I probably identify as pansexual, but I'm also very trans attracted. I'm very, I find myself very, very attracted to trans women for a lot of reasons. And I don't know. I feel like it can be kind of like, oh, you're just like a chaser, or, oh, you're, like fetishizing trans women. And I don't know. Like, should I be how should I feel about this? Because I know like what I'm attracted to, and that I'm not really like internally or externally like ashamed of or whatever. But I feel like in terms of like putting myself out there, a lot of times people will be like, oh, well, if you're pansexual, like a lot of trans women only want to date like straight guys, for instance. You know what I mean? Well, maybe you don't know what I mean. Maybe I'm just crazy.
No, I know what you mean. I see it. I think I saw a post on Twitter today that said like bisexual means something and pansexual means you're a chaser or something like that. So that sentiment is definitely very alive in the trans community. I think generally speaking, for me, I try to approach things with like, I'm not really here to be in the business of telling people what is good or not good to have in your sexuality. Like, you can't control your sexuality. It just is what it is. I would rather people feel like, so long as they're respecting everyone involved, enthusiastic consent, that they feel excited and good about what they're engaging in sexually, or romantically or whatever. I will say, from my perspective, it is a big problem though of men who would approach like me, for example, who are trans attracted, and might say like, oh, I'm so into trans women, I really like to do sexual activity X, Y, and Z, which implicitly comes with the assumption that trans women are going to want to participate in sexual activity X, Y, and Z with you, which might not be the case. And I'm not saying that you do this, Max, but I definitely see this uh, all the time. I think probably the majority of the men who come to me, I mean, and granted, I have an OnlyFans, I'm a sex worker, so I a lot of people engage with me for the purpose of exploring their fantasies, and that's totally cool. But when it comes to like actual romantic and like sexual personal engagements, it's a little different. I might not want to do the things that they see me engaging in on like those platforms in real life, and it definitely can make you feel like you're not really a person who someone is interested in, but you are an object. You're this plug and play piece that's going to fulfill the fantasy that they have. Um, so I definitely think it's worth engaging in some mindfulness that, while definitely people are probably not always giving like pansexual men who are trans attracted like a fair shot at honestly engaging with that sexuality, I think it's worth trying to like be mindful of like, if they're being difficult about it or just assuming you're a chaser, that probably is because the vast majority of men who are approaching them are approaching them that way. You know what I mean?
I do. I mean, yeah, I think I know what you mean, because like I get that a lot. And I don't know, like, okay, like sexually, I'll be at least super just blunt, like, yeah, I'm into it. Like, I would identify myself as a top, you know, but yeah, I'm very into just trans women. But I think like emotionally, spiritually, mentally, psychologically, I'm into trans people because it's like they saw something that they like, and I don't know I don't know if this is politically correct or not, but it's like they see something in themselves that they want to change and they change it. And that to me is just like so huge and like so courageous that I don't know, it also kind of has like this added layer of like, wow, you're a badass too. In addition to like just being like sexy. Like I find a lot of trans women to be. But yeah. What's like a good way to like meet trans women? Because like I'm on Grindr and Tinder and stuff, and I'm in like Portland, which is a very like trans friendly area. But like, is there an app for that? As awkward a question as that is.
Hot take. It's gonna be Twitter, if I'm being completely honest. And that's not because Twitter is a dating app. That's because that's just where all the trans women are. We're all on Twitter. All the Twitter community jokes constantly that Twitter is the trans dating app. But I will say also, I feel like I have apprehension, like hearing the like, oh, like I don't want to like project something on you that you're not bringing here. I think you've been very respectful and you've been like very willing to engage in the conversation and all that. But definitely like the explicit looking for trans women can sometimes be part of what makes us feel objectified too, you know, especially because a lot of us, like, especially for a binary trans women, like, I want someone who's attracted to me because I'm a woman, not because I'm a trans woman. And while that may not be the case for everyone, there may be some trans women who are like, I am trans, I love my trans body, I want someone who's attracted to my transness. That's not going to be all of us, you know. It's an awkward and difficult thing to navigate, and you're going to be like wading through the waters of a lot of people's baggage and like trauma and like surrounding like their experiences with partners and the affirmation of their gender. And so like I definitely want to empower you to be like, yes, you're attracted to trans women, you should absolutely pursue that. I think you definitely have to be like super mindful and careful when you're like looking for trans women about how that can come off to trans women. It can almost be like a little bit invalidating of their gender sometimes. And again, that's not for everyone. I'm not speaking for every trans person, but I definitely know that I get that impression sometimes when people are like looking for trans women. I'm like, okay, so you're looking for this idea that you have in your head of what being with a trans woman means, and you don't know if that's what that means. You know, I'm just a normal person. It's no different than being with any other woman, with potentially a few exceptions. Potentially, yeah. But I mean, I wish I had more solid advice for you. This is a difficult and like messy area of sex and dating and relationships that I don't think anyone really has really ironed out. But also, I've been talking this whole call, so if
No.
anyone wants to hop in,
I'm
please
fine
do.
with that because I have nothing meaningful to add that can override anything that you would have to say anyway. This is a Puck sits back and learns call, and I'm totally fine with that.
I'll piggyback off a little bit of it. I mean, I guess I would say too, if you're worried about, you know, not coming across the right way or possibly fetishizing or objectifying trans women, I would take the reason why you're attracted to them, which it sounds like, you know, there is this one thing and they wanted to change it and they did. I would take that reason and I would see, does that apply to other gender presentations? Does it apply to other kind of identity variables? And if it doesn't, maybe that's saying something, not something shitty, not something great, but just being curious about that in a non-judgmental kind of way.
No, that's a good point. I think for me it does. Like I see anybody like I'm pansexual. Like I used to be kind of skinny, and then like going to the gym, like, you know, and eating, you get bigger, and that's like something I was very like dysphoric about, like about my own body. But then for me it was like a big deal to like put in the effort to change that. And trans people, it's like I don't know, it's like that, but it's like that like every day. I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like this like, I guess not solidarity, but just like almost like an appreciation and a respect. That's the word I'm looking for, like a mad respect for like anybody who does that for themselves. because I feel like I need that in my own life. And I feel like the trans people I've met and have had the pleasure of dating, they like did that every day. And yeah. Thank you so much for addressing this. I was hoping that this could be addressed, and I know that it's an awkward topic because I've also dealt with it a lot, and I'm just like, I don't know, trying to like date people, not specifically trans women, but just people. I'm just like, yeah, I'm pansexual, but like, here's what that means, and I don't know, like people just have their own turnoffs, which I just have to respect. But yeah, I know what I like. I like what I like. That's why I like your show too. It's a safe space to talk about that.
Thanks so much for calling, Max. I think, if you keep at it, I think you're going to probably find ways of navigating these conversations and just trying to be honest about what you want out of it and what you're looking for. And I'm sure that with the right partner, you'll find a way to like navigate those conversations effectively. So thanks for calling in. We do have
One more?
one
Let's
more
do one
caller
more.
to get to.
Let's
but,
do one more.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have Javier, pronouns are he, him, from Minnesota. Wants to talk about Florida.
Yes, what?
Hi.
Hi there. Hey, how's it going?
We're doing great. What's on your mind?
Hey, I just have a quick question. And it has to do about I guess everybody calls it the Don't Say Gay Bill Act or whatever. And I just wanted to know, I mean, why is it okay or why is it wrong for this bill to have not passed? Or I just wanted to get your guys' take on it.
Okay, before anybody else does, I'm going to punt with an asterisk, okay? Because I've been having my mind on a lot of other things that have been going on. And the reason I want to call attention to this is because this is much more important and much more close to a lot of other people than it is to me. And I want to set the example of not interjecting my opinion on a subject that I don't have a lot of information on, and instead deferring to some people who this is much more important to and may have been researching it more. So, to you, Justine and Arden.
Oh, I think you might be muted, Justine.
Here we go. All right.
Yeah.
Did it get passed or did it not get passed?
I'm pretty sure it got passed.
It got passed. You cannot say gay in a classroom.
So this is the issue with a lot of these like trendy names, right? And I know there were some amendments to the bill that were removed that were like the most controversial. So I don't know exactly the details of how the bill stands currently. Like generally speaking, though, there's absolutely nothing wrong with teaching kids about queerness. Kids who are going to find out that they are LGBT from hearing about it in schools were already LGBT to begin with. Nobody is going to be converted into being an LGBT person by having that information made available. And there is already a massive deficit in what few classrooms probably do effective sex education of what it's like to engage with queer bodies and like different kinds of sex and love. And so I think as long as you're approaching the conversation at an age appropriate level, there is absolutely no reason why conversation around queer identity should be banned in a classroom. I think that sounds like a massive overreach of government.
I agree. I also don't know the finer points of what exactly has gotten passed, but I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I believe pretty strongly in like comprehensive sex education, and that can happen from as young as pre-K all the way up until you're a senior in high school. There are age appropriate ways to do that for every age, every grade. And that includes sexual orientation. So I feel like, if it's going to be treated comprehensively, queerness should be a part of that conversation.
Okay, so I do have a question to tag on to this that maybe you guys can answer. Because like one thought is that we have absolutely no problem showing straight couples to kids who are K through third grade, right? So if they can handle seeing a straight couple together, what's so bad about seeing a queer couple together? Like, what's your take on that thought process?
Who, me or who?
Oh, anybody on the
Because, I
panel.
mean,
I'm putting this up for
I
everybody.
mean, I think probably we both agree. We all agree on the panel that there's nothing wrong with showing queer people to young people.
Especially
So
if
I'm
you're showing
curious
straight
to
people. So
Javier, who's
yeah.
calling in with this question. Maybe what do you think about that?
well, I mean, I don't think my kid should be even looking at like straight sex when he's young. Like I don't think kids should ever be sexualized. And I mean that's kind of what's happening. I mean, you're opening kids up to sexualization, which kids are innocent. And I mean, there's drugs in the world. We shouldn't teach kids about heroin either. There's just so much subjects that aren't.
Arden and I's eyebrows raised at exactly the same moment there, and I think Arden's going to say it better than I do. So go ahead.
I mean, I had just a couple of objections. I'm sorry to cut you off so quickly, but I mean, I don't know how teaching kids that queer people exist would be sexualizing them. You're not sexualizing anything. And with regards to heroin, which seems like a way out of left field, I don't know why we can't teach them that these things exist. I think knowledge is power in these situations. You don't have to teach kids that heroin is good and fun and lovely. You can teach kids that there is a drug that exists that has massive, dangerous side effects and that can affect people in different ways. And you can teach people that some people like people who are of all different kinds of genders and all different kinds of body types, and however you choose to engage in those things when is acceptable. You don't have to teach kids who are in pre-K. When we're talking about sex ed for kids in pre-K, we're not teaching kids like, here's how you have sex. We're teaching kids that they have body parts and that those parts are okay.
That is just that's untrue. Kids are being taught specifically in kindergarten. Well, they were.
Whoa. Show before you spout off that. I want to hear this because I have never seen any example of this. And I used to be on a school board. Okay. I've never seen any example of it at that age having an actual curriculum that involves graphic presentation of sexual education to anybody at that age. So please give us a little bit. Don't just say it is happening. Please tell us where and show us the curriculum.
Fine. That's fine. I mean, I can't just show you the curriculum. I don't have it. I moved from Minnesota to Iowa for that specific purpose because they're just teaching kids some that they shouldn't learn. It's too graphic for little kids.
I can't just take your claim for this right now, okay? Because you just gave us some really bad apologetics for it. If you're saying some people are teaching it, show us who is teaching it. I need something a little bit more than just an anecdote on this one because I've been involved in curriculums before and I've never seen it. So I need you to actually give something that's a little more substantial.
Okay, I'll do that. Hold on, wait. Do you want me to call out the teacher that's doing it? Or,
No,
I mean,
the thing that is objectionable.
Teaching oral sex to kindergartners isn't objectionable?
Where is
this happening?
In Lakefield.
Okay, you're saying it's happening, but we're
small town. Like it's a small town, like a really, really small. I mean, this isn't even a big city; it's a small town.
Okay,
and
Javier, this is really easy. Teaching kids stuff that is not age appropriate about sexuality is wrong. Teaching kids things that is age appropriate about sexuality is good and helpful for them. That's the only thing I have to say left on this.
Right. And then and I agree. And then the only thing that I'm saying is we have a lot of complaints about things that are happening that we've shown is not happening. Okay. And I'm thinking immediately of critical race theory, how people are up in arms about teaching critical race theory in schools when it's not being taught in schools. Okay. It's a non-fight. So what I'm wondering right now is if this is a non-fight.
I kind of have, because I mean, even teachers are going really as far as like even posting it on TikTok. This is what I'm doing to my kids. This is what I'm teaching them. So, I mean, you can deny what I'm saying. I don't care. But when other teachers are saying like you can deny
show us, we have great ways of getting a hold of us after the show. You can email the show. You can get into our Discord, or you can get into Discord. You can get into our fan groups. I don't have time to process the evidence that you have live on the air, and we're not going to put it on the air, but I want to see if you're actually saying that this is happening. I want to know. So we're giving you some avenues to do it. We're not going to be able to do it live, but we're also not going to take your word for it. Do you understand?
Okay, then so you're assuming I'm lying?
No, I am not assuming one way or the other. I am saying I don't know. You are presenting a claim, and now it's up to you to present evidence of that claim.
That's fine. Okay, let's assume I'm lying. Would it be wrong if it's being done?
I think everybody on the panel agrees that yes, that would be wrong.
Teachers are doing it though. What I mean, that's what the whole thing of the don't
All
take
right.
gay bills.
think,
It's not
Javier,
an actual thing. Yeah.
I think we are probably done here. I'm not interested in going around in circles of you saying it's happening and us saying where for, the rest of the show. We've got a lovely guest here, and I would love to talk to her a little bit more about what she's here for rather than whatever this is. So, yep, we presented you with an opportunity to present evidence after the show, away from the show if you'd like. But for now, we are going to have to say goodbye to you. So, have a
And
good
please,
night, Javier.
yeah, we're going to talk about ways that you can continue to engage with us, including ways to present any information you might have. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. I hope you do, because I want to look into it. If something like this is happening, it deserves to be looked into. You're absolutely right. But we can't just take someone's word for it. We need to actually be presented with some evidence. We're skeptics. That's what we do. Anyway.
Well, what a detour, huh? How are we all feeling?
You know
You
what?
said skeptics. That's funny that you're like, we're skeptics, because I was saying, like, I'm an academic. Like, you can't just say something and not have a source. Like,
Yeah.
give me the works cited page. Like, I want to know all the things. Just give me the information.
I don't believe I've ever gotten that heated during a call before. I apologize if that came out of nowhere.
Nope, I think it was
Nah,
warranted.
you're
I was
good.
thinking in a few of Javier's other calls, and I know that he tends to like to be controversial and kind of do the Tucker Carlson, they're teaching this to our kids kind of thing. So it was kind of what I expected, but let's focus on what we're here for. So, Justine, we kind of talked about it a little bit, and I know what you're kind of saying it's all personal, individual, but I'm wondering if you do have any like good strategies or more like any other things that you do personally that you could share with the audience that help like open up those lines of communication and to begin start conversing about boundaries with our partners.
This is funny. This is like going to be a callback all the way into the very beginning. 'Cause I think Puck had talked about like using I statements versus you statements. I feel like if you can come at a situation using I statements or your side of the experience, your emotions, what's going on for you, that gives whoever you're talking to outside of a relationship, like at work, whatever, more of an opportunity to connect with you on a human level, an empathic level. So I would kind of come at it from that way. And I mean, some of this, I guess, feels like it would be, very like simple to do, but like also like volume, calm demeanor. I don't know, as like having those conversations and having them be tied to as few extraneous variables as possible, and you can kind of come to it with like a clean read of the situation, I think is super important. Like these conversations should not come at the end or in the middle of an argument. They should come when things are a little bit more calm, a little bit more chill. Yeah.
No, see, this is like we are, and I apologize for this, but we are leaving so much on the table. Like we skipped enough questions to have its own episode of its own. So I hope we get to talk more about this. Anyway, sorry, Arden, I stepped right in the middle of that. Keep going.
No, I definitely do think I was a little disappointed to pull away from the kind of conversation about the intersections of like race and polyamory that we were having earlier that I think was like super informative that I would have loved to heard more of. So maybe we'll have to get Justine back in the future to talk some more. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of a lot more of the same. We're talking about like these routines and like tricks. Are like, do you have any good resources maybe, do you think, for our viewers on like ways we can learn to communicate more around these boundaries?
Yeah. Sorry, y'all, there's police going like right by the apartment. I'm so sorry about that. But so I love Instagram. I think Instagram is an excellent resource for any kind of community, any kind of topic that you want to learn more about. there's someone that I follow on there. She actually wrote a book. Her name's Nedra Tawwab, about boundaries. She's all about boundaries. She's very big on that. She doesn't have anything to do with polyam community or anything like that, but she's lovely. Her book is called Set Boundaries, Find Peace, and it's good for anybody. Like, and she covers like at work, with family, romantically. Like, this is how you can go about setting boundaries. She's pretty amazing, so I would recommend following her on Instagram, buying her book. In general, like John Gottman is a pretty important individual in, like, you know, relational communication world. He talks a lot about how to communicate around boundaries and sensitive topics. Anything that he's written is really good. He's amazing. Those are some places I think.
Yeah, I've read some John Gottman after some less than healthy relationships, and was very enlightened to just learn a few things about the ways in which I was even engaging, and that my partner was engaging, that were less than productive.
Yeah, John Gottman's the man. He's cool.
And that would be like my only the any routine that I have is that once you've established a boundary, that's like step one, right? Because boundaries can evolve. You are going to evolve. Your partner is going to evolve. And I can like tell you from personal experience, some boundaries that I had in my relationship with my wife 10 years ago have completely morphed into different things. And sometimes it's like it changed a little bit. Like, okay, I guess we can have a little more involvement with others. And sometimes it was like a big sweeping change. And it, you know, it catches you off guard sometimes. But if you, you know, like Justine, I think you said earlier, realize that you're on the same team, right? You're not competing against each other. You're cooperating toward a common shared goal. And I think that's my big takeaway from this is have that mindset of you are teammates and not competitors in when you have a relationship with someone. Even if you are hurt, even if you feel jealous about something that your partner did, they did not, you know, okay, well, I can't say for sure, but chances are they didn't do it to get a reaction from you. Chances are they just might not have been aware of it, and that's something to talk about. So thank you very much for coming on and talking about all these wonderful things. So where are more ways that we can get in touch with you and see your work?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, every Monday morning at 10:30 Central Standard Time on Stereo, I do a show with a fellow consensually non-monogamous woman, where we cover books in the polyamorous, you know, world. We're on break right now, but when we come back, I think in a month and a half, we're going to start talking about this web series on YouTube called Compersion, which has like 2 seasons. And it's just all about, it's not like documentary, but it's all about a couple opening up their marriage and trying out polyamory for the first time. It's supposed to be good representation, so we'll be doing that. I also, and this is another thing I could talk about. I'm on Instagram. I don't have a professional Instagram and then a personal Instagram. I just have one Instagram. It's important to me that all of that be in one place. So I always encourage people, if you're in the state of Texas, where I'm currently licensed, and you're looking for any kind of, you know, I mean, I do a lot of work with polyamorous individuals, but anything to do with relationship orientation, sexual orientation, eating disorders, ethnic identity work, you need a therapist, you can seek me out on Instagram, and we'll sort it out.
I appreciate that you do that, because I have like a personal profile, which is like for people who I know in real life, and then I have my activist puck profile, which I kind of keep like over there, like try to keep as much distance and separation as possible. They're blurring now that I've been doing this for like as long as I have, but I appreciate how brave people are who have a profile that they are willing to engage on with people on a number of different levels. So that's awesome. And I love that you mentioned compersion, because we last year, I think it was last April or May, had an episode on secular sexuality about compersion, which segues very neatly to the fact that you can catch all of our secular sexuality back episodes, as well as episodes of the other shows on the AN network at tiny.cc/ AEN Podcasts, where you can catch back episodes of Secular Sexuality, Atheist Experience, and the flagship show of the Atheist Community of Austin, Nonprofits. You can also find us on Facebook at our Secular Sexuality fan group. There you go, tiny.cc/FBSSG, run by the fans for the fans. A lot of us will continue to engage on there, and there's always good conversation to be had. Another great place is the Atheist Community of Discord. You can get there by going to tiny.cc/ACD Discord. I'm a regular over there, usually in the late mornings and early afternoons. It's a fantastic place to get in touch with like-minded people or have a good old, good-natured philosophical debate. If you like some good secular sexuality swag, and who doesn't, you can go to tiny.cc/merchaca, where you too can get secular sexuality gear. I have like 3 of those shirts, and I want that. I keep on saying I want that pillow. I never actually buy the pillow. One of these days, I promise, Greg, I'll buy the pillow. And if you'd like to support the show, you can hit that bell, like, comment, and subscribe. Continue to engage with us here on YouTube. But finally, let's give a quick hello to the crew who makes it so all we have to do is sit here and look pretty while they do all the actual work. Go crew. Aw.
Yeah, there they are.
Look at that.
Love 'em. Couldn't do it without them.
I remember yay long years ago I was among them, but now I'm not allowed to sit at the grown-ups table, so they make me sit up here with the hosts. All right. Well, do we have final thoughts we'd like to leave anybody with tonight?
Yeah.
Justine, what you got?
I don't know. I guess, we're talking about negotiating like different things that you want from others, relationships or whatever. I guess my final thought would be, I feel like those negotiations get easier the older you get and the more you know yourself. So I don't know. That's where I want to leave it.
No,
That's
my final thought is that anything that we touched on today, as important as it was, is just a small part of what there is to be talked about when it comes to boundaries. So we appreciate everybody who was watching and listening, but please continue to look into this. There's no way we can cover everything that's important to cover in a 90-minute show. So please, please, please keep researching, keep reading, and keep sharing with us what you've learned and what you have questions about.
Yeah, I think I'll probably definitely be watching this episode back to really let some of the stuff sink in a little bit more deeply. But yeah, thank you so much, Justine, for coming here and giving us all that awesome information. I think you've definitely hopefully helped some of our viewers to feel a little bit more empowered when engaging in their relationships or even with themselves sexually. And with that in mind, I would like to invite our viewers to, fluff a couple of pillows and maybe light a candle or two and lay back and give yourself a big old orgasm, or better yet, give somebody else one.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.